Awesome. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today for this Introduction to Sharperlight webinar. Now, we're running this webinar because more and more of our customers are looking for smarter and faster ways to access and analyze their ERP data. So not just within their live system, but across multiple environments or even legacy systems that they've moved away from. But look, before I get much further into this, I'll quickly introduce myself. So my name is Matt Evlampief. I am the Head of Sales for Solutions Plus across the business application space. And joining me today, we've got Donald Wynn, who is the Systems Accountant and Pre-Sales Architect for Sharperlight. So you may have noticed there's a different face on the screen there. Jeff is an apology today, so Donald has kindly stepped in. Now, during ERP projects, we often find that there is a recurring theme, and that is that businesses often want to move forward with a modern ERP, but they do typically need visibility into their historical data. Now, whether it's for compliance, it's for trend analysis, or simply understanding how performance has changed over time and comparative reporting, pulling that data into the new ERP isn't always practical or cost effective. And that's where we're finding that Sharperlight comes in, both from that migration sense, as well as connecting those different systems. So as we start to look at unlocking the value of Sharperlight, there's really three key themes that we're going to talk about today. Firstly, we want to look at sort of how you can get smarter and faster access to your ERP data. Obviously, we've already mentioned the visibility across both live and historical or disconnected systems, and really why that matters during that transitional phase, or simply if you're trying to tidy up your reporting across multiple sort of disparate systems there. So I'll just get you to go to the next slide, please, Tim. So in terms of where Sharperlight fits in, we have sort of already talked about it, but there is those three key areas. So connecting the legacy databases and not trying to bloat the new environment, accessing across those multiple data sources, and that could be from ERP, payroll, it could be distribution feeds, EDI. There's a whole range of different sort of data parameters that you can map together. And then equally what we find is that for a lot of internal reports across different functions in the business, it can be a lot easier to use Sharperlight rather than relying on either complex Power BI reports or to simply solve ad hoc queries. So look, in terms of where we go from here, I'm going to introduce Donald shortly, and he's going to take us through what makes this platform so effective. So he's going to walk through how it connects to your ERP, how you can keep historical data accessible during those transitions, and how it compares in a way to the likes of Power BI and some of those other terms, both in terms of speed and simplicity. So for today's session, we will try to keep things practical and focused on real use cases. And the goal really is so you can walk away with a clearer picture on whether Sharperlight is the right tool and how it fits into your toolkit to get the most value out of your data. So with all of that, what I'll do, there's a little agenda you can see on the screen here, but I'm now going to pass over to Donald to dive in and show us how it works. So over to you, Donald.
Thank you very much, Matt. Okay, so a little bit, I will start with a little bit on Sharperlight. To give you the backstory to me, I'm a crusty old accountant who spent most of his life doing reporting. So it's funny that I would work for a company that does reporting. So Sharperlight as a company founded in 2008, we've got operations, well, we've got a reseller channel which is global, but we've got offices both in Perth, Western Australia and the UK. We have a very large client base through resellers, and it gets it into basically any vertical that you can imagine, from aerospace to mining to super to investment, oil and gas, blah, 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 it all. So Sharperlight as a product has tapped into a need with a lot of organisations. So it's actually quite an interesting sort of product in its own right. Tim, if you go to the next slide. So Sharperlight as a product is built on the basis that allows you to go away and access information from multiple systems. So in some respects, I like to say it's a little bit like an octopus, that it can actually go off and pull information out of multiple systems at the same time. The query engine is basically designed so you can install it both on-premise or in the cloud. So it's not a case of it has to be a hosted cloud like Power BI. With Sharperlight, you can install it wherever you want. And the query engine uses what we call data models or connectors to access these diverse systems. Now, we provide commercial data models. We also provide the development tools to build other data models, so that if you've got some sort of system that you want to access and nobody's written a commercial data model, it can be you can very quickly build a connector to pull information out of that. The key thing to understand is that Sharperlight, the communication layer in Sharperlight, is all driven based on web services. So you could host your data in the UK, and people all over the world could then access that data securely via web services. So the Sharperlight client, so I'll show you the Excel add-in that we have, and that'll kind of demonstrate what the client looks like, or one facet of it. That uses the web services. We also do web-based reporting as well. So web reports, dashboards. We also have a concept of web spreadsheets. They all use the web service sort of concept as well. So it's quite an interesting sort of concept that with Sharperlight, when COVID hit, a lot of our customers who are on premise immediately said, well, we need to allow access to our diverse workforce. And it was like, Sharperlight's already pre-built, ready to go. And we just set them up and they're away. Next slide, please. Okay, just a little bit of an understanding. So data models are the secret sauce of how it works, and the data model defines how an end user can interact with the underlying system. But ultimately what we're doing is pulling information out of some sort of reporting database. Now that reporting database might be like SAP HANA, it might be Oracle, it might be SQL Server, it might be Postgres, it may be some sort of database, and Sharperlight can connect to a whole multitude of different databases. If it's an API, we generally synchronize the data into a reporting database, but basically Sharperlight sits over that database and pulls information out, and I will show you how that actually works. With ERP implementations, the challenge is always a case of, well, I've got the old system over there, I've got the new system that's currently being implemented, potentially quite different architecture. I want to see the data's over there and the data's here. And in Sharperlight, we've got multiple different ways of handling that sort of scenario where you still want to have access to bits of stuff over there whilst actively using the new live stuff, or the stuff that will become live in the imminent future. So with Sharperlight, you can actually connect directly to those systems. So for example, you're going from Nav to Business Central, we have connectors to both Nav and Business Central. If you're going from MyOb to SAP Business One, we have connectors for those as well. Some systems which are a little bit less common, or we haven't built a connector for, we can easily build a connector. Or the other scenario, which is quite often the case, is we can just pull out snapshots of data and put it into a materialized table. And that's something else I'll mention briefly as I go through. So you can still access that information and use it with your live data and bringing it together. Because really, so again, getting back to the analogy, Sharperlight as an octopus can pull that information in from multiple different sources. If you just go to the next slide, Tim. Okay, so data models are not all the same. Data models present differently because obviously a data model that sits over the top of an ERP system will be different to a data model that sits over a payroll system. Certainly a lot of ERP systems, there's a similar sort of mindset or structure. All data models are driven based on a table view, a navigation view. So I've just got 3 different views, navigation views, and each of those views provides a mechanism to go through and access what we would call queryable objects. They're tables, but they may not be tables, they might be something quite different. But ultimately, all the end user needs to know is, you go to this table, this gives me access to blah, and all the relationships and fields for that table are already pre-built into the model. That's the key ID. So lay users do not have to understand the underlying database. That's very important. Just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Sharperlight as a product has multiple presentation layers. So Excel is one of our presentation layers. We also have web-based capabilities, web reports and such like. That's another type of presentation layer. The Excel element is extremely popular. It allows you to both build reports in Excel using query formulas and being refreshable. It also allows you to upload data into specific systems. So for example, with SAP Business One, we use the DI API to upload data back into SAP. With Business Central, we can upload them, uploading journals and such like back through the BC web service, using the standard validation that it adheres to in the underlying system. So we're not bypassing anything. If you just go to the next slide, Tim. And the website of the reporting, so Sharperlight, zero footprint, so you don't need a client for that. It's just browser based. Most of it's HTML5. So pretty much any modern browser will support interactions using the Sharperlight web service. And through the web, you can also do data entry as well. Slightly less common, but it is capable of doing that and is designed to allow you to do that. Okay, so what I will now do, yep, sorry, Matt.
I was just going to say, it might be worth noting as well that what we find with some customers is that you've got your internal stakeholders and you want to run your reporting through that engine. But what we're finding more and more is that customers are actually giving access to external stakeholders, such as suppliers, to reports like this, so they can actually see their sell-through data or performance data. So there's also sort of an added layer of that. And I don't know, Donald, if you could quickly speak to that in terms of being able to give external access, but that's gated within the web access as well.
Yeah, so as a web front end, obviously it's all got to be completely secured because it's got to be able to run through the internet. So you can actually bind security around that. So you can have different security protocols. So in-house you could use Azure AD, and then you can actually have another set of users which are using a different security protocol, and you can bind to that. So ultimately, everybody then has to adhere to a valid login and an authentication to actually get in and access the data through the web. So it's actually very good in that respect. And yes, we do have a lot of customers that actually set up Sharperlight as a web-facing, customer-facing front end for reporting purposes, because it's very efficient in that respect. Okay,
Thanks,
so what I'll do is I will just share my machine. Here we go. So there's going to be the vein of legacy reporting and basically concepts of how we can actually pull information out of other systems. But I was thinking to myself, to be able to really explain that, I actually have to show you what Sharperlight does. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and show you different ways that Sharperlight works, give you a bit of a feel for the actual product. And in doing so, I'll also talk about pulling in legacy information from multiple systems. So I'm going to start off in Excel. I'm going to build a simple query to get us started. So with Sharperlight, the query builder, the standard common user interface for building the queries, it's the same interface whether I use it in Excel or I use it in some of the other desktop clients or I use it in the web, because we have a web version of the query builder. So it's the same user interface. Through this interface, you can connect to different data models. So in this case here, it's automatically picked up employment payroll. If I was to select SAP Business One, give me a list of fields. So these are obviously SAP Business One fields. If I was to go back to Business Central, back here, the table tree changes, but it's basically just connecting to another system. Now, one of the things that I'm just trying to emphasize there is that you can build queries that go off and pull information from multiple systems. And you can also pull queries out of materialized data sets. So getting back to something I talked about with legacy reporting, sometimes people need to pull the data out of the underlying system because they're never going to get access to it. For example, they're on Oracle and they're getting rid of Oracle, so they actually need to convert it into SQL. You can suck the information out and put it into a materialized table in a materialized database. So these ones down here are materialized versions of the data. It's just another way that we can provide legacy data for reporting purposes. But I'll use BC as the example here. I'm just building a simple query in Excel. I can link the query to the underlying Excel spreadsheet. I'll select the GL entry table just to make it simple. I'm going to link it with an account range from and to, got a posting date from and to, and I'm just going to output a couple of fields. So this is just building a very, very simple sort of query. And one of the things that I quite often talk about at this point is this whole concept of self-service reporting. But you've got a whole pile of different diverse sort of systems. You need to pull information out very quickly. You need to provide content to people. Sharperlight is very successful as a self-service reporting tool. So with minimum training, you can very quickly pull this information out. So I've got a query, I'm getting some data out. I'm going to output that into an Excel spreadsheet. So what it's done, it's created a query formula that has generated an Excel table. So because I clicked on the table icon here to create this, it's created a table. I can change the filter criteria if I want. So if I click on the actual filter and I go up here and say, well, I want to change the account range, changing that, it's going to go away and recalculate that data. So it's using automatic recalculation in Excel. And the queries on the right-hand side, they all flickered as well because they're all linked to the same filter criteria as well. So you're not tied to one query in one sheet. You can have lots of queries in one sheet and you can have thousands of queries in a workbook. Now, what you can also do with Sharperlight by the power of the actual data model is that as well as querying it, you can drill into it. So you can take an element and you can drill into the data set and then you can analyze it further and go down to the transactional detail. Now, this here would work exactly the same whether I was using SAP Business One or one of those materialized tables. So the interface I'm looking at here is what we call our Explorer interface, which is designed to drill down on the fly, slice and dice data. Drill down with Sharperlight exists in a number of different ways. So drill down is very much an ad hoc sort of thing. We also support the idea of drill through. So a drill through is you've pre-built a drill path. So I click on it and goes, boom, straight to it. Now, the wonderful thing about a drill through is that that query, the drill throughs are stored in the query. So if I take that query and then I want to use it somewhere else, so let's say, for example, I want to turn this query into a web query. I want to publish it. So I'm going to push it into a web browser. So I push it into what we call Publisher. And I apply that and then I just view it. So I'm going to view the query that was in Excel. I'm now viewing it in a web browser. So it's not a snapshot, it's actually the live query. And in fact, I can change the query here. So I'm not changing the query in Excel, I'm actually changing the query in the web. Now, these are all revenue accounts, so I'm just going to reverse the sign, hit OK. If I then refresh this query, hit submit, so I refreshed it to get the change, you can actually see here that the signs have actually changed. So I've changed the underlying query. I haven't changed with the query in Excel because that's a separate copy. In the web, I have the same drill through capabilities as well. So that drill through that existed in Excel works in the web. Now, in the web, I can output it as a chart and I get the same drill through capability. I can also push that into a Sharperlight dashboard. So I've got a dashboard here. I say new. I'll just pick up that very little simple query. Here we go, without prompts. I'll do it as a chart. Go, save that. There we go. So I've now just added a tile and the same drill down. So even though it's a dashboard with a chart in it, it's immediately sort of drill down capabilities as well. So within 3 minutes, I've created a query, I've taken a similar query, I've published it to the web, I've then consumed it a number of different ways in a web browser. And that's kind of a testament to the self-service sort of capabilities with Sharperlight. It's very easy to build stuff and consume it in different ways. So there's reusability, but also you can build queries and you can immediately kind of say, well, I don't need it again. You can throw it away. So you're not investing a lot of time in building report packs and things like that, which you might do with a product like Power BI. You'd invest a lot of time sourcing the data and all that sort of stuff.
It's
Oh,
gonna,
looks like, yep.
just say as well, while we're in there, Don, it might be worth just touching on, and we might not need to go into an example, but often a lot of people find that they may need to translate data. So that could either be from a dimension perspective, where there might be customer categories or product categories that haven't been assigned to data, or equally it might be where you've got, 3 separate codes across 3 separate systems and unifying those. Could you touch on that for just a minute, just to help the audience understand how Sharperlight can support that?
Yep. So there is the capability to, in the options here, you've got a concept. Where is it? Oh, which field did I select? Oh, I selected an amount field. Wrong field.
Sorry to put you on the spot, mate.
That's all right. So we've got a concept of mapping. So you can actually set up a mapping structure. So say, for example, I'm dealing with account numbers in 2 different systems. I can actually set a mapping so that whenever I actually go to my account number in this system, I'll get a new account structure to map to that as well. So that's one of the ways we can actually do it. We can also do, it's pretty much transformation on the fly, which we can actually do in the data model layer. So basically, if you always have this transformation that you want to do, you can actually have a secondary field that actually appears here, like account number 2, and account number 2 is the transformed account number. So for the end user, it's completely seamless. They just go, oh, account number is 2 is the transformed one, and hey presto, they just drag out and filter on it, blah, blah, blah. So they are the standard ways we actually do that. With legacy data, because quite often you're dealing with data sets coming out of other systems and you change the coding, what we normally do is we transform it when we bring it into the reporting database. So we actually do that on the fly. And if I have a chance at the very end, I'll do a very simple example of how we actually do that. But that's very useful, and it's pretty straightforward based on the way Sharperlight works. So rather than trying to do lookups in Excel, we actually do it in the writeback. So what I wanted to do here is just jump onto a couple of different styles, reporting styles, so just get a feel for the sort of things that Sharperlight can do. So you can do tables with multiple columns of data. You can do reports in Excel, and obviously you can do charting over the top of it. So we don't take any functionality away from Excel. It's standard functionality. We just carry on with it. We can do comparative reporting, so actual to budgets and things like that. And in Excel, we can hook into the grouping capabilities in Excel. So when you run this query, it actually generates those grouping controls for you. In Excel, one of the things that is very popular is self-contained formulas, these value formulas. So value formulas allow you to return an individual balance into a cell. So it could be budgets, it could be actuals, it could be year-to-dates. And each of these cells in this financial report is a self-contained little query in its own right. So it gives the person complete control on the layout of, in this case, financial reporting, but it's not just financial reporting. I've got people who use this for warehouse deployment. People use it in the mining industry. People use it in oil and gas. It's just that concept of taking, I want to return an aggregated value. So whether it be the count, the min, the max value, they just bring it out and just chuck it in there into an individual cell, which means you can lay out your sheet in whatever way you want. Now, at this point, most of the stuff that I'm talking about here has purely been reporting capabilities. What I just very quickly want to jump on is this little icon up here, which we talk about being writeback. So this is where Sharperlight, as well as being a reporting tool, we can actually take data and push it back into the underlying system. So writeback, and this is a simple example of a writeback for Business Central, but it would work exactly the same with SAP Business One, and the interface looks exactly the same. So pretty much you have a defined table, which is writeback enabled, and you'd have that in a tree structure. And then that table would have writeback fields, which you can map to the underlying sheet. So in this case here, all I need to do is provide a minimum number of fields. So the fields which have got little stars on it are actually mandatory fields. And I've just mapped to the underlying sheet. So I can hard code it, or I can map it to single cells, or I can map it to ranges, and I can read that data. It pretty much scrapes the data off the Excel spreadsheet and sends it back to the underlying system. It validates partially in Excel, but does the bulk of the validation in the underlying system. So we're not bypassing any sort of validation as well. Now, write back in its own right is very useful because we can also use it as a migration tool from an old system. So we could actually say, well, we've got this old system over here. We need to get data out of it. Do we have direct database connectivity? No, we do not. Oh, okay. Can we get the data into Excel? Yes, we can. Oh, sure. Okay, so get it into Excel. We'll actually use an Excel spreadsheet and we'll use that and we will upload the data. We will write back into a reporting database for your reporting purposes. So this sort of capability allows you to bulk load masses of data and putting it into a legacy environment if you cannot get access to that existing database, if it's you're going to lose access at some point in time in the future. One of the things that I guess is important, and let me jump to my other spreadsheet. Here we go, this one here. Okay, so you can invest a lot of your time in Excel, and Sharperlight is certainly very capable in Excel. But what we try to do is kind of complement what we do in Excel and make it available to a larger audience. A larger audience for Excel is not great. So one of the ways that we can actually take content and make it available to a larger audience in the web is we can publish Excel workbooks. So this workbook here has only got, 4 sheets on it. If I publish this, and it's now a web version of the same workbook. Now, it's not Excel in the background. It's not Google Sheets or whatever. It's basically a standalone web spreadsheet interface. You can still have multiple sheets. So we support charting, you can run your reports. You still have write back capability in the web as well. And that kind of allows you to tie it into the other element, the website of Sharperlight. So this here is a web menu. So I've got dashboards and different styles of reports. With this, I can tie it all together. So obviously these are menus, so different styles of reports here. But if I go to my demo reports, I can actually select my web spreadsheet. That is the web spreadsheet that I've just refreshed. Now, I could hide the toolbar, so it could just be a grid, or I could even hide the rows and columns. I could hide the sheets as well. So you just see that central area, the actual web spreadsheet part, as a self-contained thing in its own right. And you still get the drill down capability. So the drill down that existed in Excel flows through. Now, not to say that Excel is the only way to do things. That is an important thing to understand. So Sharperlight has its own standalone dashboarding capabilities, which have different attributes over and above what Excel can do. And you can also do financial reporting in the web using our own tools. Yep. Okay. That's
Now,
pretty
Donald,
simple. Yep.
I might have to cut you short here because we've got 2 minutes to go, but there's just so much to unpack here, which I'm hoping our audience can see. Is there any final note with 2 minutes left just before I jump back in quickly?
No. What I was just going to do here, let me just open up this. Okay. So we've just looked at really kind of 2 major components of Sharperlight. There is actually a whole pile of functionality in the toolbox, and you get all this when you install Sharperlight. So schedulers, security roles for row level security, materialized queries to actually materialize data and stage it. So these are all concepts which come with the standard Sharperlight toolset. And I will hand back to you, Matt.
Cool. Well, 2 minutes or 1 minute to wrap up. I'll make it very quick. Look, I think that was a great sort of insight into what Sharperlight can do and its capabilities. I think certainly on the data migration front, which is often underestimated, there's a lot that can be said for, cheaper and more productive ways to get that data in. But in terms of, to wrap up the session today, we've tried to sort of show that reporting doesn't always need to be complex. And you've seen today how fast and accessible we can build those data models. I think we've touched on sort of a practical way to bridge that gap. and that there is a lot of reliable reporting while everything does change around it. So if you did want to go deeper, you can scan the QR code or reach out to myself directly and we can talk through. But also on the back of this session, Sharperlight have kindly made a special offer where they're willing to provide 6 months of licensing for Sharperlight free for any of the attendees on today's session. So if you are interested and do think it could provide value in terms of either a migration or just connecting those different data systems, we're happy to chat and see whether we can support you. So thank you again for joining today, and I hope you got some value out of it. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.